From the outside, David and Emily's relationship seemed like the perfect love story. A tale of second chances, fresh starts, and the promise of new beginnings. They had both been hurt by past relationships, carrying the scars of broken trust and unfulfilled love. But when they found each other, it felt as though their wounds were finally starting to heal. David, the ever-hopeful romantic, was drawn to Emily's warmth, her gentle smile, and her ability to make even the darkest days feel brighter. Emily, on the other hand, saw in David a love that was genuine and patient, qualities she hadn't experienced in her previous relationships. Together, they created a world that was theirs, one where they built memories, laughed, and slowly began to trust again. The unsettling distance. Emily's behavior begins to shift. David loved Emily with everything he had. She was his partner, his confidant, his future. Yet, as the months passed, he noticed small but undeniable changes in her behavior. She had always been open with him, sharing her thoughts and dreams. But now, conversations felt more forced, more strained. The intimacy that had once come so naturally between them began to fade. She would pull away when he reached out, both emotionally and physically. It wasn't a dramatic shift, no loud arguments or obvious signs of trouble, just an increasing distance that left David confused and heartbroken. He tried to address the issue directly, suggesting ways they could rekindle their connection. Perhaps a weekend getaway, a spontaneous adventure, or even just more time together, away from the distractions of daily life. Yet every time Emily's response was the same, a soft, hesitant smile, her eyes flickering with uncertainty as she gently asked for space. She would explain that she needed time to herself, that there were things she was dealing with internally, but her words didn't match her actions. David respected her need for space, of course. He was patient, understanding, willing to give her the room she requested, all the while holding on to the belief that this was just a phase, a temporary struggle. But deep down, he felt a storm brewing, a storm that he could sense but couldn't yet see. His heart, ever the optimist, didn't want to believe that something was wrong. But his instincts, honed over years of navigating relationships, told him otherwise. The secret. Emily's growing desires and Mark's entrance. The truth, however, was far more complicated than David could ever have imagined. Emily, despite her love for him, was carrying a secret, one that she kept hidden deep within herself, so well guarded that it terrified her to even acknowledge it. The love she felt for David was real, but it was not enough. There was a longing deep inside her that she couldn't ignore. It wasn't something she had planned for, nor was it something she wanted to face, but it was undeniable. There was a part of her that was unfulfilled. She found herself craving more, something beyond the routine of their life together, beyond the affection they shared. It was at this point that Mark entered her life, a charismatic, spontaneous stranger who seemed to embody everything that David was not. Mark had an energy about him that sparked something in Emily that she had long since buried. He was bold, daring, and unapologetically himself. Where David was steady and predictable, Mark was electrifying, a whirlwind of excitement that pulled Emily in like a force of nature. What began as a fleeting flirtation, a harmless escape from the routine of her life, quickly spiraled into something more dangerous, more intense. Mark didn't just see Emily as a partner. He saw her as a woman to be desired, to be understood in a way that David never had. With Mark, she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. His presence lit a fire within her, one that had long been extinguished by the comfort of her life with David. Every interaction with him was a rush, an exhilarating departure from the quiet, predictable life she had come to know. Mark gave her the attention and excitement she craved, and with every stolen moment, every secret rendezvous, Emily felt herself slipping further away from David, from the life they had built together. The guilt and the thrill. Emily's inner conflict. Despite the overwhelming sense of guilt that weighed on her heart, Emily couldn't help but be drawn to Mark. She tried to tell herself that it wasn't her fault, that she wasn't the one who had failed her relationship with David. It wasn't as though David had done anything wrong. He had been loving, supportive, and patient. But he couldn't give her what Mark did. He couldn't make her feel the way Mark made her feel. The connection with Mark was raw, untamed, and thrilling in a way that Emily had never known. With him, she could be someone entirely new, someone liberated from the expectations that had come to define her relationship with David. As the weeks passed, Emily's internal struggle grew. She knew she was betraying David, yet every time she saw Mark, it felt like she was stepping into a version of herself that she had long since abandoned. It was a version of herself that was confident, bold, and unapologetic. A woman who pursued what she wanted without fear or hesitation. But when she returned to David, she felt like a stranger in her own life. The woman who had once been certain of her love for him now questioned everything. David's growing doubts, the unease in his heart. David, on the other hand, could feel the distance growing between them. It wasn't just a lack of physical intimacy. He could sense that Emily was emotionally distant, that something inside her had shifted. He tried to reason with himself, telling himself it was just a temporary phase, that life had become busy and stressful for both of them. Maybe she was just tired or preoccupied with work or personal matters. But the nagging feeling in his gut never went away. The doubts began to creep in, slowly at first, but then more persistently. He couldn't help but wonder if there was something more to Emily's behavior, something that wasn't being addressed. He had tried to talk to her, to ask her what was going on, but she always deflected, giving him vague answers or insisting that everything was fine. She told him she just needed space, but David couldn't ignore the feeling that something deeper was at play. Was it his age? His immaturity? Was it his inability to fully understand the complexities of her needs and desires? The more he tried to understand, the more confused he became. His mind raced with possibilities. Was there another man? Was Emily seeing someone else? Was there something in their relationship that he had failed to see all along? The breaking point. Emily's final choice. Emily's relationship with Mark continued to evolve, each meeting with him pulling her further away from David, from the life they had built. With Mark, Emily felt a kind of intensity that she had never felt with David. His touch was electric, his words intoxicating. With every encounter, she felt herself becoming more and more entangled in the web of desire and emotion that Mark had created. And the more she gave into him, the more she felt a growing sense of liberation, a sense of being alive in a way she hadn't experienced in years. But it was also becoming unbearable. The guilt, the shame, the weight of her betrayal, it was all too much to carry. Emily loved David. She truly did. But her love for him had been overshadowed by the emotional intensity of her affair with Mark. She couldn't deny the pull she felt for Mark, couldn't resist the craving to be with him, to feel seen and desired in a way she never had with David. The allure of the forbidden. Mark's presence. Emily's encounter with Mark had been entirely unplanned. It was a chance meeting at a friend's gathering, a brief exchange of words that should have ended there. But something about him had captivated her in a way that David never could. Mark was everything David wasn't. Spontaneous, charismatic, and full of energy. He exuded a raw magnetism that drew her in, a force that made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. At first it was innocent, a harmless flirtation, an escape from the confines of her predictable routine. But the attraction quickly escalated into something more. With Mark, Emily found herself shedding the layers of responsibility and routine that had come to define her life with David. She was able to express parts of herself that had long been buried, to feel desired and free in ways she had forgotten were possible. Each encounter with Mark felt like an awakening, a rediscovery of a side of herself that she had buried under the weight of her relationship with David. Mark's touch was electrifying, his words a promise of something more, something real and passionate that she couldn't resist. She found herself craving his presence, his touch, and the fire that he ignited in her. What started as a fleeting distraction became an all-consuming connection. It was as though Mark made her feel truly seen, not as a partner or caretaker, but as a woman who was worthy of being loved, desired, and celebrated. David's growing doubts, the tipping point. David, ever the perceptive partner, began to notice the small changes in Emily's behavior. At first, he told himself that it was just a phase, that she was simply going through something personal that she didn't want to share. But as the days turned into weeks, his intuition told him that something far more significant was at play. Emily was withdrawing from him in ways that felt unnatural. Her laughter no longer had the same warmth. Her touch no longer sparked the connection it once did. Her eyes, which had once radiated affection, seemed to glaze over whenever he spoke to her. There were moments when he caught her staring at her phone, her fingers twitching nervously over the screen. But when he asked her about it, she would dismiss it with a vague excuse, as if he had overreacted. The once open and honest conversations they had shared seemed to fade, replaced by awkward silences and forced exchanges. David's mind raced as he tried to piece together the puzzle. Was it something he had done? Had he changed in some way that made her pull away from him? He wondered if their age difference, which had never been a source of tension before, had finally begun to create a rift between them that he couldn't see. But no matter how hard he tried to ignore it, the unsettling feeling in his gut refused to subside. The more he tried to brush aside his suspicions, the more they consumed him. He couldn't deny it any longer. Their relationship was not what it had once been, and Emily's behavior was the most obvious sign of it. One night, unable to shake the gnawing need for answers, David found himself lying awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The weight of the doubt pressing on his chest was unbearable, and he realized that he could no longer live in the uncertainty. His heart ached with the desire for clarity, even if that meant facing the truth of what was happening between them. As Emily lay asleep beside him, her breathing steady and serene, David's mind was anything but calm. The temptation to confront the situation head-on, to search for answers, was overwhelming. He reached for Emily's phone, his hands trembling as he held the device in his palms. The very act of unlocking the phone felt like a betrayal, but the desperation for answers overpowered the guilt that gnawed at him. The dreadful discovery, the truth unveiled. What David found on Emily's phone shattered everything. There, laid bare in a series of intimate, explicit messages between Emily and Mark, was the truth he had been too afraid to face. The messages were raw, passionate, and brimming with declarations of love and longing. Words that had once been shared between him and Emily now seemed tainted, as though their meaning had been stolen by someone else. David's heart stopped in his chest as the truth hit him like a tidal wave. The woman he had loved, the woman he had trusted above all else, had been leading a double life, one that he had never even suspected. The sheer magnitude of the betrayal left him breathless, unable to process the rawness of the pain that surged through him. Every word he read felt like a knife being driven into his chest, a wound that would never fully heal. The betrayal was not just in the infidelity. It was in the lies, the secrets, the manipulation of trust. David had given Emily everything, his heart, his soul, his love. And yet in the blink of an eye, all of that had been tossed aside, trampled by the weight of her deceit. The world around him seemed to collapse, and the life he had once cherished with Emily was now reduced to a shattered illusion. The confrontation, the breaking point. The following morning, as the painful weight of the truth settled over him, David stood face to face with Emily. His hand shook as he held up the phone, the damning evidence clear and undeniable. His voice, once steady and confident, now trembled with emotion as he spoke, each word laced with pain. "Why, Emily?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you trust me enough to be honest?" Emily, caught off guard, initially denied everything. Her fragile defense crumbled as the weight of the evidence pressed down on her. Her tears flowed freely as the truth poured from her lips in a torrent of guilt and regret. She admitted that while she had loved the security and warmth that David had provided, she had found something in Mark that she couldn't resist. A passion, a fire, something that had ignited a part of her she had long forgotten. David's mind raced, his thoughts a blur of anger, heartbreak, and confusion. How could this have happened? How had he missed the signs? His heart shattered as Emily's confession continued to unravel everything he had believed in. The unlikely connection with Carol. It was in this environment that David met Carol, a 68-year-old woman whose warmth seemed to fill the room. Her presence was magnetic, not because of any outward grandeur, but because of the deep, quiet wisdom that emanated from her. She had lived a life full of both joy and hardship, but it was clear that she had learned to embrace both with equal grace. Carol's laughter, a rich, genuine sound that could easily brighten even the darkest of days, was a balm to David's weary soul. When she spoke, her words were carefully chosen, never rushed, and yet always filled with a depth that caught David off guard. There was something in her eyes, a look that seemed to say, "I understand you." Over time, their friendship blossomed slowly, like a flower that opens up one petal at a time. It started with casual conversations after the group meetings. Sometimes they spoke of their pasts, of regrets and choices that shaped them. Other times they sat in companionable silence, the kind that spoke volumes without a single word. There was something about Carol's steady presence that gave David the permission he hadn't realized he needed, to heal, to forgive himself, and to begin again. She didn't offer him answers or solutions, but she did offer him something far more valuable: understanding. With Carol by his side, David began to piece together the shattered fragments of his life. It was not a quick process, nor was it without setbacks. There were days when the weight of his past threatened to pull him under, but Carol's presence remained a steady reminder that the past, while important, did not have to dictate his future. He began to see that perhaps he could, in fact, rebuild a life that was not defined by his losses, but by the lessons they had imparted. The unfinished chapter, Emily. Yet, even as David was learning to embrace the warmth of new beginnings, the past was never far behind. Emily, the woman from his past, reached out to him, desperate for a second chance. David had once loved Emily with a fierce intensity. Their relationship had been passionate, filled with moments of excitement and promise. But it had also been marked by an undercurrent of instability. Emily, though beautiful and captivating, had always been restless. Caught between a yearning for the love she craved and the need for independence she couldn't quite reconcile. David had poured his heart into their relationship, believing that she could be the answer to the emptiness he had felt for so long. But as time wore on, it became painfully clear that Emily was not the person who could help him fill that void. She was not the partner he needed, someone who could offer stability, understanding, and shared dreams, but rather a reflection of his own desperate need for love and connection. When Emily ended their relationship abruptly, it had shattered him. He had been blindsided, left to pick up the pieces of his heart and wonder where he had gone wrong. When Emily came to him now, seeking reconciliation, David had changed. He had grown. The man who had once longed for her affection now saw her not as the woman he had loved, but as a symbol of the consequences of hasty decisions. Emily's need for validation and the love she sought outside herself had caused irreparable damage. David, having found his own sense of worth through his healing and the deep bond he shared with Carol, no longer felt the pull of his past with Emily. Their love, once so fiery and all-consuming, had faded into a quiet lesson in self-awareness. David had come to understand that love, in its truest form, was not about the intensity of the passion or the fleeting moments of joy. It was about mutual respect, trust, and the commitment to grow together. Emily's choices had been impulsive, driven by a desire to escape the pain of her own life, and in doing so, she had caused irreversible harm. For David, their relationship was a reminder that the most meaningful connections were those built on shared values and a deep understanding of each other's needs. A New Beginning, David's book of transformation. David's journey of healing, of rebuilding his life after loss and betrayal, culminated in a profound decision. He would write a book, a memoir of sorts, though not one filled with self-pity or regret. Instead, his book would serve as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of second chances. He titled it, New Beginnings, Time Doesn't Erase, a reflection of the belief that while time may heal wounds, it is how we choose to use that time that truly defines us. In his book, David would recount the pain of his past, but more importantly, he would write about how that pain had shaped him, how it had forced him to confront his own limitations, fears, and vulnerabilities. He would write about the individuals who had helped him heal, Carol, his friends, and the many strangers he had met along the way. And he would write about the moments of quiet self-discovery that had brought him to a place of peace. The book resonated deeply with readers, especially older adults who had faced their own battles with loss, regret, and the passage of time. For many of them, David's words were a lifeline. They were a reminder that even in the twilight years of life, there was still time to reinvent oneself, to start fresh, and to find meaning and purpose once again. David's story was not just his own. It was a reflection of the human condition, of the ways in which we are all bound by the struggles we face, and the courage it takes to rise from them. The painful truth about relationships and aging. As David reflected on his life, he realized that one of the most painful lessons he had learned had to do with relationships, particularly those that occurred later in life. As an older man, there was a unique set of pressures that he had never fully understood until he had experienced them firsthand. There was a quiet, almost insidious expectation to prove that he still had the vitality, the passion, and the energy of his youth. This need for external validation had led him into relationships that, in hindsight, were never based on true emotional connection, but rather on the desire to feel relevant again. His relationship with Emily had been a reflection of this need. Driven by loneliness and the desire for connection, David had overlooked the fundamental aspects of compatibility that were necessary for a lasting partnership. They had shared moments of intimacy, but their connection had always been fragile, built more on the fleeting desires of the moment than on shared life goals or mutual respect. This was the painful truth that David had come to realize. Relationships, particularly those in later life, required more than just chemistry or physical attraction. They needed a foundation of trust, shared values, and a deep understanding of each other's needs. Without that, even the most passionate relationships were destined to falter. The beauty of second chances. David's story was a reminder to all who encountered it that life is a journey of transformation. It is never too late to start over, to heal, to learn from our mistakes, and to embrace the possibility of new beginnings. Through his pain, David found a new sense of purpose and a deep understanding of what truly mattered in life. His journey was proof that even in our darkest moments, there is always a path forward. The most beautiful chapters of life often come after the hardest trials. And if we are willing to take those first difficult steps toward healing, we can rebuild our lives with strength, clarity, and hope for the future. David's story is a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of self-love, and the endless possibilities that exist when we embrace second chances. The most profound lessons in life often come from the most painful experiences, and it is through those lessons that we discover who we truly are and what we are capable of becoming.